Every state has a motor vehicle code, and as a driver, you are required to follow it. Or are you? I studied the Arizona Motor Vehicle Code, and this is what it said. The provisions of Chapter 3 Traffic and Vehicle Regulations and Chapter 5 Penalties and Procedures for Vehicle Violations refer exclusively to the operation of vehicles on highways. So it's saying this only applies to vehicles. So we need to find out what exactly is a vehicle. Well, the United States Code defines this for us in 18 U.S.C. 31A6. The United States Code defines a motor vehicle, and it says this: the term motor vehicle means every description of carriage or other contrivance propelled or drawn by mechanical power and used for commercial purposes on the highways in the transportation of passengers and property or cargo. So it's only a motor vehicle if it's used for commercial purposes. The United States Code also defines commercial purposes for us in 18 U.S.C. 31A10. It says the term used for commercial purposes means the carriage of persons or property for any fare, fee, rate, charge, or other consideration, or directly or indirectly in connection with any business or other undertaking intended for profit. So if you are a taxi driver, bus driver, Uber driver, if you're hired to drive truck transporting property, then you have to follow the motor vehicle code because you are driving a motor vehicle because it's being used for commercial purposes. However, if you're just traveling in your car to work or the grocery store, then you do not have to follow the motor vehicle code because you are not driving a motor vehicle. Because remember, it says this refers exclusively to the operation of vehicles, and it's only a vehicle if it's used for commercial purposes. And since you are not using your car for commercial purposes, it's not a vehicle. So you do not have to follow the motor vehicle code. So that means you have the right to travel without a driver's license or registration. And this is all according to our beautiful U.S. code. But that's not all. The Supreme Court has also talked about this many times. Here is a U.S. Supreme Court citation from Thompson versus Smith. And they say, the right of a citizen to travel upon the public highways and to transport his or her property thereon by horse-drawn carriage, wagon, or automobile is not a mere privilege which may be permitted or prohibited at will, but a common right which he has under his right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Under this constitutional guarantee, one may therefore, under normal conditions, non-commercial use, travel at his inclination along the public highways or in public places, and while conducting himself in an orderly and decent manner, neither interfering with nor disturbing another's rights, he will be protected not only in his person, but in his safe conduct. So we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, if you look up personal liberty in Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition, it says personal liberty is the right or power of locomotion, of changing situation, or moving one's person to whatsoever place one's own inclination may direct, without imprisonment or restraint, unless by due course of law. Not code. Because remember, code is not law. In Self versus Ray, they talk about this. They say, Revised Code of Washington is not the law. Code is actually a constructive contract. And in Graham versus Cummings, they talk about this, saying, a constructive contract is where duty defines it instead of the contract defining the duty to be performed. Constructive contracts are fictions of law adopted to enforce the legal duties by actions of contract where no proper contract exists, express or implied. So, when traveling in non-commercial intercourse, there is no enforceable contract with the state of state without one's consent. One's consent is given by silence, by compliance without claim of right, and complying when asked for the driver's license and handing it out the window, thereby giving tacit agreement of engaging in commercial intercourse. So as long as you claim your right to travel, do not hand them your driver's license indicating that you are operating commercially, because you only need a driver's license if you're operating commercially. So by handing that to the police officer, you're saying, I'm operating commercially. So as long as you do not hand them your driver's license and you claim your right to travel, then you are not bound by this motor vehicle code, which is a constructive contract. And the United States Supreme Court has held multiple times that the right of locomotion, the right to remove from one place to another according to inclination, is an attribute of personal liberty. In Robertson versus Department of Public Works, they say complete freedom of the highways is so old and well established, a blessing that we have forgotten the days of the robber barons and toll roads. And yet, under an act like this, arbitrarily administered, the highways may be completely monopolized. If through lack of interest the people submit, then they may look to see the most sacred of their liberties taken from them one by more or less rapid encroachment. In Murdoch versus Penn, they say a state may not impose a charge for the enjoyment of a right granted by the federal Constitution, and that a flat license tax here involves restraints in advance of the constitutional right secured by the First Amendment. And then in Shuttlesworth versus Birmingham, they say if the state does convert your right into a privilege and issue a license and a fee for it, you can ignore the license and a fee and engage the right with impunity. And in Cruden versus Neal, they even say this: every man is independent of all laws except those prescribed by nature. He is not bound by any institutions formed by his fellow man without his consent. So if somebody makes a bunch of rules and says, hey, you have to follow my rules, no, actually you don't. You don't have to follow anybody else's rules unless you consent to following those rules. Now, why have so many judges defended our constitutional right to travel? It's because any judge or magistrate who does not comply with his/her oath to the Constitution of the United States wars against that Constitution and engages in acts in violation of the supreme law of the land. The judge is engaged in acts of treason. Obviously, a judge does not want to be engaging in treason, so they're going to do their best to defend your rights. The Constitution is a charter of negative liberties. It tells the state to let people alone. It does not require a federal government or the state to provide services, even so elementary a service as maintaining law and order. And that's exactly right. We just want to be left alone to live our lives how we want to live them. We just want to be free to do what we want. We just want the government to leave us alone, stop trying to control everything we do, constantly harass us. And some of you are probably thinking, I like the motor vehicle code. It keeps us safe. I don't want people driving around with no driver's license. That sounds dangerous. Well, if you think about it, would you let your child drive without any driving training? Because I wouldn't. Even if driver's license were not required, there's no way I would ever let my child go drive a car without any training. I'd be like, all right, well, first, I'm gonna either personally train you how to drive this car and drive with you and watch you drive until I'm confident you're a competent driver before I actually let you drive. Or I'm gonna have them take a course online and learn how to drive, and then once they've passed that course online, then I would start driving with them, and once I see they are a competent driver, then I'd let them drive. So people would still be getting trained to drive. You just wouldn't have to pay for a license to drive and then pay for registration, and you wouldn't have to constantly be getting harassed by the police every time you slightly break a rule, every time you go 6 miles per hour over the speed limit or roll through a stop sign. Benjamin Franklin once said, "Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety." And the government is constantly trying to take away more and more of our liberties, always in the name of safety. And if we keep letting them go further and further, it won't be long until we are complete slaves, completely controlled, no freedom whatsoever. And the government is very sneaky. They increase their level of control over you at such a slow pace that nobody really notices. They'll increase the level of control slightly to the point where people are like, oh, that's annoying. I don't like that. But it's not a big enough deal that anybody actually does anything. And then people complain for a while. And then after a while, people forget about it and they just accept it and move on. And once everyone's accepted that, then the government does the same thing again, turns up the level of control a little more, and they just keep repeating that until eventually we're all complete slaves. And so it's like the frog sitting in a pan of water and the heat slowly getting turned up so slowly that it never notices until it's boiled alive. And basically that's what's been happening to us. And one day when we're all in concentration camps, they're going to announce no more 30 minutes of free time at the end of the day, because sometimes people get into fights, and for your guys' safety, we're just going to work all day and then go straight to bed because that's the safest way to live. And we'll go, oh man, darn, maybe we should bust out of here. And there'll be some people who'll go, no, I think it's for the best. I'm actually glad they did this because I feel a lot safer this way, just working all day under their supervision where we're all safe and protected, and then we just go to bed. It's great. We're completely safe. I mean, why would you want anything different? So there you have it. According to the US Code and the Supreme Court, you do not need a driver's license and you do not need registration, and you don't have to follow the motor vehicle code unless, of course, you are operating commercially, then it all applies to you. But if you're not operating commercially, none of this applies to you. Now, with all that being said, I am not recommending you get rid of your driver's license, get rid of your registration, stop following the motor vehicle code, or anything like that. And the reason is because most police officers, they don't know about any of this stuff we just talked about. And so when a police officer pulls you over, they're not going to know about any of this stuff. And so most likely they're going to either give you a ticket or arrest you. And so unless you're prepared to defend yourself in court, you unfortunately still have to follow their rules. But if enough people become aware of this information, especially police officers, then maybe we can do something about it and finally get back our right to travel. So hopefully a lot of police officers are watching this right now. Make sure to tell every police officer you know about this information, and let's see if we can get our freedoms back.